Have you ever found yourself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, with that unmistakable feeling that something isn't right with your life? That sense that days are passing, yet nothing is changing? If you're nodding right now, this video might be the most important one you watch this year. What I'm about to share isn't another collection of empty motivational phrases. It's a psychological blueprint for genuine transformation, the kind that doesn't just inspire you for a day, but actually changes your life's trajectory. So stay with me until the end, because I'm going to reveal why most people remain stuck despite wanting change, and the exact psychological mechanisms you need to understand to break free. This isn't about small adjustments. It's about becoming the true author of your life story. There's a profound truth that psychologists have observed throughout history. We humans are masterful at self-deception. We tell ourselves tomorrow will be different while doing exactly what we did yesterday. We convince ourselves that circumstances are to blame, that the timing isn't right, that we just need to wait a little longer. And in this way, days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and eventually years slip by while we remain essentially unchanged. Carl Jung, one of psychology's most influential thinkers, identified something critical about this pattern. He observed that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This insight cuts to the heart of why transformation is so difficult. Most of what drives our behavior, our fears, our deepest desires, our self-limiting beliefs, operates below the surface of our awareness. We feel stuck without understanding why we're stuck. The first step toward authentic change is recognizing a psychological principle that few people acknowledge. Transformation doesn't happen gradually or comfortably. As Viktor Frankl noted from his observations in concentration camps, significant personal change often emerges from confrontation with difficult truths. It requires what psychologists call productive discomfort, the willingness to step into uncertainty and face what we've been avoiding. Think about the patterns in your own life. How many nights have you gone to bed promising tomorrow would be different? How many times have you felt that pang of regret as another day passed without change? This cycle persists because we've misunderstood the nature of transformation itself. We've been waiting for it to feel natural and painless, when psychologically speaking, real change initially feels like an assault on our established identity. The modern world has created a particular problem that psychologists are increasingly concerned about, what Robert Kegan calls the immunity to change. We've developed sophisticated psychological defense mechanisms that protect us from the discomfort of transformation. We distract ourselves with endless entertainment. We seek constant validation through social media. We fill every silent moment with noise to avoid confronting our deepest truths. And yet, ironically, it's precisely in those moments of silence and solitude that the seeds of genuine change take root. Neuropsychological research has shown that our most profound insights occur not during active thinking, but in states of quiet reflection when the brain's default mode network activates. This explains why breakthroughs often happen during a walk in nature, in the shower, or in those quiet moments before sleep, when we finally stop running from ourselves. William James, the father of American psychology, noted that the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind. Yet this alteration rarely happens through gentle affirmations or wishful thinking. It emerges through what psychologists now call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension that arises when we confront the gap between who we are and who we could be. Consider this. Each of us carries multiple potential versions of ourselves. Psychological research on possible selves shows that we continuously imagine futures where we've become different people, healthier, more successful, more fulfilled. The tragedy is that most of these possible selves remain unrealized, not because they're unattainable, but because the path to becoming them requires facing what we're most afraid to see. Psychologist Abraham Maslow described this as the Jonah complex, the fear of our own greatness. We sabotage our growth not because we fear failure, but because we fear the responsibility that comes with living up to our potential. This explains why so many people remain in situations they've outgrown, relationships that no longer serve them, careers that drain their spirit, habits that undermine their well-being. The familiarity of our current limitations feels safer than the uncertainty of transformation. Yet something powerful happens when we finally gather the courage to look at ourselves honestly. Neuroscience has shown that the act of self-reflection activates regions in the prefrontal cortex associated with self-awareness and behavioral regulation. This is why the simple act of writing about your life, specifically about what isn't working, can create such profound shifts. You're literally rewiring neural pathways that have kept you stuck in repetitive patterns. The method is deceptively simple but psychologically profound. A notebook, a pen, and the quiet hours when defenses are lowest. This practice draws on what psychologists call expressive writing, a technique shown to reduce anxiety, improve immune function, and increase psychological well-being. The key difference is the focus not just on emotional expression, but on radical honesty about the stories you've been telling yourself. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, renowned for his work on optimal experience, observed that the best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times. The best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. This explains why meaningful change feels challenging. It's supposed to. The discomfort isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's evidence that you're finally doing something right. The psychological concept of narrative identity helps explain why this approach works. We quite literally become the stories we tell about ourselves. When you begin to question and rewrite these stories, you're not just changing your thoughts, you're changing the very structure of your identity. This is why simply adding new habits often fails, while deeply examining and reimagining your personal narrative succeeds. There's a fascinating psychological phenomenon called temporal discounting, our tendency to prioritize immediate comfort over long-term fulfillment. We choose the instant relief of distraction over the initial discomfort of growth. We opt for another night of numbness rather than facing the anxiety of change. This bias is wired into our brains, but understanding it gives us the power to override it. As psychologist Kelly McGonigal notes, merely recognizing this tendency reduces its influence over our choices. The resistance you feel toward honest self-reflection isn't random. It's your brain's attempt to maintain homeostasis, to preserve the status quo. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio's research shows that our decisions are guided not just by logical reasoning, but by somatic markers, bodily sensations that signal potential threats. When you contemplate genuine change, these warning signals activate, creating the feeling of resistance. Understanding this explains why transformation requires courage. You're literally overriding your brain's protection mechanisms. Consider for a moment what happens when you continue to avoid this process. Psychologist Philip Zimbardo's work on time perspective demonstrates that people who remain stuck in negative past experiences or who fail to develop a future orientation experience higher rates of depression, anxiety, and regret. The psychological cost of avoidance isn't neutral. It accumulates over time, manifesting as what therapists call existential depression, the deep sense that life is passing you by. Contrast this with the psychological state that emerges when people actively author their own lives. Martin Seligman's research on authentic happiness shows that people who take responsibility for their choices and align their actions with their deepest values experience not just greater satisfaction, but what he calls flourishing, a state of genuine well-being characterized by meaning, engagement, and positive emotion. The night can serve as a powerful psychological container for this work. Research on circadian rhythms shows that our defenses naturally lower in the evening hours. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for our logical thinking and self-censorship, becomes less active, allowing deeper access to unconscious material. This creates what Jungian analysts call a liminal space, a threshold between your current reality and possible futures where transformation becomes possible. What makes this process so powerful is that it bypasses the most common psychological barrier to change, waiting until you feel ready. Behavioral scientists have demonstrated repeatedly that motivation doesn't precede action, it follows it. By sitting down to write even when you don't feel inspired, you create what psychologists call action potential, the neurological pathway that makes subsequent action more likely. You don't need to feel ready to begin. Beginning is what creates readiness. There's a concept in depth psychology called the shadow, the aspects of ourselves we've disowned or hidden from awareness. Jung believed that much of our stagnation stems from avoiding these rejected parts. When you honestly examine what isn't working in your life, you're doing what he called shadow work, integrating the disowned aspects of yourself that contain both your greatest wounds and your untapped potential. This integration doesn't happen through positive thinking, but through unflinching honesty. The most transformative questions aren't about what you want to add to your life, but what you need to release. Psychologist Rick Hanson's research on neuroplasticity shows that our brains develop stronger connections to negative experiences than positive ones, a phenomenon called the negativity bias. This explains why simply adding new goals or habits often fails to create lasting change. The neural pathways maintaining your current patterns must be weakened before new ones can take hold. Perhaps the most profound psychological insight about transformation is this: the version of you that can create the change you seek already exists within you. Self-determination theory, developed by psychologists Edward Dacey and Richard Ryan, demonstrates that humans have an inherent tendency toward growth and integration. We're naturally drawn toward becoming more authentic versions of ourselves when the right conditions are present. The obstacles aren't external circumstances, but internal resistance. This resistance isn't imaginary. It's rooted in what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. When you contemplate significant change, you create tension between your current self-concept and the person you might become. Your brain attempts to resolve this tension, usually by maintaining the status quo. Understanding this process allows you to work with it rather than against it, using discomfort as a compass pointing toward growth rather than a signal to retreat. The truth about transformation is both simpler and more demanding than most personal development approaches suggest. It doesn't require complex systems or extraordinary circumstances. It requires only your willingness to sit with yourself in honest reflection, to write the truth about where you are and why, and to make one decision, not about some distant future, but about what you'll do differently tomorrow. This single decision, made with clarity and commitment, creates what psychologists call a pattern interrupt, a break in your habitual response that opens space for new behaviors. Research on habit formation shows that these interrupts are critical moments where lasting change becomes possible. They create openings in otherwise automatic sequences, allowing new choices to take root. What makes tonight different from all the other nights when you've contemplated change? Nothing, except your decision to treat it differently. Psychology teaches us that meaning isn't inherent in moments, but created through our relationship to them. You can make this ordinary evening extraordinary simply by deciding it marks the beginning of a new chapter in your story. The most powerful realization in this process is that you don't need to change everything at once. Research on behavioral change by psychologist B.J. Fogg shows that tiny, consistent shifts create momentum that eventually transforms entire patterns. The key is specificity, not vague intentions, but clear decisions about what you'll do differently tomorrow, decisions concrete enough to be acted upon immediately. As you contemplate this invitation to become the author of your own life, consider the alternative. Psychologist Bronnie Ware's research with dying patients revealed that the most common regret at life's end isn't about failures, but about lives unlived. The choices unmade, the authenticity sacrificed, the dreams abandoned. The psychological pain of regret far outweighs the temporary discomfort of change. Tonight can be different, not because of any external circumstance, but because you decide it will be. This decision isn't about feeling motivated or inspired. It's about recognizing that the story of your life is being written either way, either by conscious choice or by default. The pen is in your hand. The blank page awaits. If this video has resonated with something deep within you, I invite you to take one simple action right now. Leave a comment saying, "I am rewriting my story," and share one specific change you commit to making tomorrow. Not a vague intention, but a concrete action. By declaring it publicly, you create what psychologists call accountability, an external commitment that strengthens internal resolve. And if you want to continue this journey of psychological transformation, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications for more content that cuts through motivational cliches to deliver real psychological insights for authentic change. Your story isn't finished. It's waiting for you to pick up the pen and continue writing.